Hi everyone, I'm Shelley and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. Today I'm back with another question the narrative video, and this time I'm revisiting the mudflood theory, and it's not going to be the last time that I'm checking it out because I think that it's extremely interesting. You might hear the little pitter patter of little feet in the background. That's because we just got a puppy and he is very active. And he does not want to stay down in my bedroom while I make this video. So he's going to be up here wreaking havoc as I'm trying to record. But life goes on, right? So I get a lot of emails and I'm very slowly trying to work my way through them. And as I was working through the emails, I found one that I thought was really interesting. Actually, excuse me, this one's not even an email. This was one of my comments. But yeah, the comments too, I'm trying to work through. And this one was actually from a video that I made a while ago, but it makes a lot of sense. So this is from Joshua, and he said, reset 1, the flood. Reset 2, Armageddon. Reset 3, the end of the 1,000-year reign of Jesus. We give too much credit to those who work against God when we assume that it's them who control everything. So if we go back to reset 1, the flood, that would be the cities underwater now. Reset 2 would be Armageddon, the melted structures and mountains. And reset 3, end of Christ's reign, mud flood buildings caused by soil liquefaction from the great earthquake after the war of Gog and Magog. This is all proven both in scripture and comparing scripture to the world around us. Now, I would say that for the end of Christ's reign, I believe the soil liquefaction could also be from the time that Satan is loosed. I could definitely see a worldwide earthquake happening at that point in time, because if we would be at that point in that short season, I don't believe that Gog and Magog would have happened yet. I could be wrong because I am certainly no Bible scholar, but this is certainly a possibility, but I believe it could also just be an earthquake from when Satan was loose from his prison for the short season. So that is really what inspired this video today, because I think that it is a very good theory that there have been 3 resets and that they were not instigated by the controllers, but by God himself. So let's just look at some of the buildings, the building evidence, we could call it, that would illustrate the flood. So reset 1. So here we have a photo of some underwater pyramids and some other structures. And, to me, that really gives a clear example that the pyramids that we find both in South America and in Mexico and in Egypt and all over the world, there are pyramids all over the world. They're just not as famous as the ones in Egypt. But they are also pre-flood, and that would have been during reset 1, the flood. And I did mention in another video that I believed that the flood would have been a reset. Here we have another photo of an underground pyramid, and this certainly looks like the ones that you would find in Mexico. This, I believe this is in the Mediterranean. And this is also some underwater structures. Now, I do want to point out that I am not saying that all of these were submerged in the flood. What I'm saying is that it is just giving you an illustration of what these remains would look like if this were the case. And this one I found really interesting, and I don't know honestly if this is real because it looks like an entire underwater town. And it's from thisisitaly.com. And yeah, I don't know, but if you actually look at it, to me, that looks a lot like what we call Tartarian architecture today. So, for example, we could consider this to be what people call Tartarian architecture. And I'm not saying that it has anything to do actually with Grand Tartaria, but I'm just using that classification to describe just this idea of this beautiful, exquisite architecture all over the world in a time period when it seems that people would not have the technology to do these things. And, we were always given the impression in school that we are so much better than our ancestors. But if you actually, look into the second law of thermodynamics, things do break down over time. They get worse over time. And that includes humans. Evolution it's impossible. We humans are de-evolving, and this is really a great example of that. And so to me, if you go back to this underwater structure here, it really could illustrate that the people who lived in the antediluvian era likely had far more advanced technology than not only than what we think that they might have had, but probably far more advanced technology than what we have. So building something like this would not have been that big of a deal to them. And here's just another example of what we would call Tartarian architecture that really reminds me of what we saw in that underwater photo. And, you know, I think that a lot of the buildings that we see like this, and again, this is just all, I'm just postulating here, but um, I think that a lot of the buildings that we see possibly could have been pre-flood. Now, one misgiving that I have about the whole scenario is water damage, but we don't know how much these buildings have been renovated over time. And if they had advanced technology, they very likely would have had a more durable way of building. I don't know. But to me, you know, I think that we really need to start looking into whether these buildings that we are looking at were built by a people that we never even suspected could have possibly done it. And this is just a photo of the Grand Canyon. And there are actually, if you look here in the distance, it does look like there could be some pyramid-like structures here. And there are a lot of um, narrative accounts of people finding Egyptian artifacts in the Grand Canyon and what looked to be like pyramids. And I've actually talked about this a little bit in one of my other videos about the reset. Um, but this really just shows if there were a reset, this would certainly be evidence of it right here. Imagine a flood so cataclysmic that it was able to carve something like this out. You can't get more destructive than that. Now, I do have to point out, though, that I'm also of the belief that this could possibly have been a mining operation. Um, and that is another video entirely. So, you know, so many theories out there, but you know what? I'm going to explore them because I think it's interesting, and there's nothing wrong with using your brain just to even dream once in a while. And here is just a photo of an above ground pyramid. Which we've all seen photos of these before. But for now, let's head back to this comment because I'm going to shortly get into Reset 2, Armageddon, and what we could look at as evidence of that. But I do have to say that in between 1 and 2, I would also consider, and I've spoken of this in another video as well, I would also consider the Tower of Babel to be a reset as well. And that could actually explain why there are so many similar architecture styles all over the world in a time period. Well, we're in a time period that we were told that they were built when there would have been no communication between some of these countries, at least not to the extent that they would be building almost exact replicas of the architecture. And I know a lot of people say that that was English colonization, but not all the time. Not all of the countries that had this architecture were colonized by the British. So anyway, but we're not going to get into that one right now. Let's just get into Armageddon. And Armageddon would be the melted structures and mountains. So let's look at that. Okay, so I was just scrolling around on Instagram and I decided to look in some of my saved photos, and I found some interesting ones that would have gone well in with Armageddon, because when you think of Armageddon, you think of fire raining down from the sky, and this would have had the ability to melt buildings, which we do see evidence of melted buildings and structures all over the world. And this is just one example of what looks to be that it could have been a melted building. Now, this also kind of looks like aqueducts to me. very well could have been. And it also has the features of what in my hometown they call limestone kilns, although I don't think that's what this is. To me, it looks like it could be more of an aqueduct, but it could also indeed be the photo of an enormous melted building. Let's see. And here's just another example. We have this beautiful building over here, and then we take a look at this, and this certainly looks like it was a building. I don't know how big it was though. If you look at the size of this, to me this actually looks like it was very small. So I'm actually kind of leery about that now looking at it a second time, but you can give me your thoughts on that one. This one definitely looks like something melted and landed on top of this building right here. And then also we have here, and we have these towers in the Himalayas, and then we have these in Turkey. And yeah, they do look very similar, and they do indeed look like they could have possibly been melted. From what though? That's the question. And you can find these buildings all over the world, and most people would not even suspect. This is Castle Rock, and if you look very closely at it, it looks like there are entrances. So could this have been a melted building? Look at all these places. And a lot of times we will look for right angles. Sometimes in these melted structures, you can see columns. I just watched a Paul Cook video, I think it was yesterday or the day before, and he took his own video footage and he showed what they call a cliff. You could actually see columns in there. Here's another great example. If that doesn't look melted, I don't know what would. Here we have this too. And again, the question is, what melted these things? Could it have been what we're calling reset 2, Armageddon? This one I had never seen before. But you can just go right on. I use DuckDuckGo, but you can go right on the image search and you can type these things in. And it is amazing all of the what look to be melted structures that show up. We also have this one here. Now, the problem that I have with this one is how this facade here stayed so spotless in comparison with everything else. But I know that a lot of people do point to this also as evidence of a melted structure. This certainly looks melted. Look at the shape of these windows. It's kind of looks lopsided, and everything just looks lopsided, and it just looks like it was almost in a kiln and just was clay and just started melting, melting, melting. And then we have this one here, which also looks like, and this is just another one of those cases where this stayed, you know, pretty nice. My vocabulary is not working today, but it definitely seems like it was rather untouched if you would compare it to everything else. But this again looks like something that may have melted. And am I ever saying that these things are definitely the case? No, I'm just saying that we know that we've been lied to about so many different things, and that it comes to the point that you have to start looking into things yourself, because we're not going to be told the truth by at least the people in charge, are we? So I did also go on Google Earth just to show that we have these craters here, and I talked about these in another video, but we have the Ubehebe craters. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but there are pock marks and craters like this all over the world. And so that could also some of the areas. Now, I wasn't able to spend a whole lot of time on Google Earth, but I've already been searching for it and was able to find just huge areas just complete with pockmarks everywhere. And that could certainly, to me, be evidence of fire from above, or it could even be heat from below, and almost like bubbles popping. And I did talk about that in another video also. And if you look at Lichtenberg figures, this is what happens when someone is struck by lightning. And this is what it looks like on them. And lightning, of course, is extremely hot. And what do you see here? To me, I'll back up a little bit, certainly looks like Lichtenberg figures to me. So we have those. Now, again, yes, it could have been from water flow. It could have been from things flowing. But I just find the resemblance between this and Lichtenberg figures caused by lightning, intense heat. And I thought that was interesting evidence as well. So now I'm going to get into the reset 3, the end of the 1,000-year reign of Jesus. And again, mud flood building caused by soil liquefaction from the great earthquake. And it could have been from the war of Gog and Magog, but as I also speculated, it could have been from when Satan was released. And this is a theory that the 1,000-year reign of Christ has already ended, and that we are living in the short season spoken of in Revelation 20, after Satan is loose from his prison for a short time, to make war, basically. And then he will be vanquished again. You know, thank the Lord, we know that Satan will be vanquished again. And once the Lord returns, that's going to be the end of Satan. But he would have his time now. But anyway, so we have some evidence of what looked to be mud flood buildings, buried buildings. If you've ever watched the news footage in earthquake ravaged areas, you will see that a lot of times there are half buried buildings. Some of them are crooked. And what we are finding is that this right here looks like they excavated and found some buildings underneath, possibly could have been tunnels as well. And if there were an earthquake and soil liquefaction did occur, yes, the lower half of doors and windows would have been buried. So the theory is that after that happened, that would be the third reset, and people came, dug it out, and basically called those buildings their own. And, you know, people ask, why would they hide it? Well, if there were evidence that Christ had already reigned for 1,000 years, wouldn't if you were one of the bad guys, wouldn't you want to hide that as well? So anyway, the reason I have this building here, this beautiful building, and as you can see, we've got what look to be like, they look like mud flood windows here. Looks like a door there also. Now, that's not always the case. I know that there are some newer buildings where they will put in a basement window. But when you can see these older buildings being excavated and you see that they have doors that are 6 feet under the ground, it's not the case. So this actually was a great photo that I found. It's on hyacinthresearch.com. And this certainly looks to me like something being dug out. Here we also have another image we have the muddy streets and these lower level windows. Here's a modern day building. And I have to say, well, I shouldn't say modern day building. I should say a modern day photo. The one that I just showed you was, you know, clearly older. But this was taken probably recently, and I could take pictures of this all over my town. There are so many buildings that look like this, and I've actually done videos showing this. But yeah, we have half buried doors, half buried windows. And, you know, could that be reset 3? I believe that there's a very good possibility that it could be. So again, you know, we go back to the idea that reset 1 was the flood. That would be the underwater buildings and some of the other buildings, especially the more grand structures that we see today. I also have to add, especially if you look at a lot of the castles that have the huge doorways, and not even just castles, but a lot of older buildings had huge doorways. And there is a theory that pre-flood, antediluvian era, not only were there giants, but that the people, the humans in general, were taller in those days. So it would make sense that some of those grander structures would have been in the antediluvian era before reset 1, before that flood. And then again, we would have reset 2, which would have been a time of the melted structures. Trying to find a photo. I have everything like it's not even in order, and I don't know why. Okay, so that would be the time period, the reset, when there were melted structures and heat coming from above. And that certainly would tie in with Armageddon were it to have occurred. And then we have reset 3, the one that I just spoke of, when either Satan was released or when the great earthquake happened and soil liquefaction, half buried buildings, and a new populace came, dug everything out, and said, hey, we're going to claim these buildings for our own, and we're going to rewrite history because we don't want the truth to be known. So anyway, that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.